give me a thumbs up or something to check that you can see my PowerPoint slide fine as well. That would be super helpful. Brilliant. So, welcome this afternoon and thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Brown, so I work for Cyclone, and this has been put on in partnership with Microsoft. This session today is all about PowerPoint and using it in some hopefully slightly different ways to what you've seen used before. Getting it off the projector at times and using it to support student learning. So on the slide there, I've got 3 titles. My preferential one is in green. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but you'll just have to excuse the exceedingly clickbaity title at the top there. So the point of today is really just to see some new ways that you can be using PowerPoint and hopefully some real practical guidance about how that actually works as well. So just to start off with, there's a little bit of a background. So I am a science teacher originally, so I am really interested in, I guess, sort of evidence and research. So if that's not you, you'll just have to excuse us for a couple of minutes, but we'll go through this reasonably quickly. But why we might want to use PowerPoint and why some of the things we'll talk about today might work very well for you in your classrooms. So we're going to go through a couple of theories there. So very briefly, something called dual coding, something called cognitive load theory. And then the last point we've got there is we've all got chaos at the moment. There's many absences. That alone is encouraging a lot of people to try a more hybrid or even fully flipped teaching model. And some of the video recording things we'll be talking about today will really help to support that if you haven't used them before. So that's kind of in the why we might actually want to use some of the things today, and why I think PowerPoint is kind of wrongly or underutilized in many ways. So the things we can actually do with it, there's a lot of ways in which possibly you already do, and teachers do great work with slideshows, but there's some key techniques we can use to actually make them more effective, and a lot of research that backs some of those changes. So the next thing there we want to look at is the sort of headline title here, this non-linear presentations, making slideshows that move around in response to user input, and either having students create those or you create those. And then after that too, the big bit about recording video. So just how we can use PowerPoint to do that, and there's several different things we can do there. So then we'll get into the technical part of this sort of actually how you can do this. So some basic tips there, just in terms of producing slideshows. Those might be new to you, some of them might not be, they're quite helpful there. Then we'll go into these bits here about putting links and buttons in your slides that means students or you can actually move around throughout your slideshow as you teach without having to kind of escape out and go down to another slide or go back through 30 slides, which I spent many years doing myself. So, and then finally there, we're actually going to look at how you record video. I can give you some general hints just about improving the quality of that. We're not going to turn you into cinematographers, but just things that make it a little bit easier for your students to access, or if your students are recording, for you to access later. And then the last thing we're going to get up to there is just a very brief discussion and more to prompt your thinking really about who should actually be making these slideshows. There's huge benefit in having students generate content. We know that. And just some considerations about when that might work well and what scaffolding they'll need. So this is the overview of today. I'm just going to go back a slide. This is our big diagram that should sum up today's content. And you'll notice up here in this slideshow today, we've actually got these tabs here, and that'll keep track of where we are. But just like the name says, we can actually click those at various stages to get around. So a super brief psychology background into cognitive load theory. If you haven't heard of this before, don't be scared. There's actually some real simple takeaways from this. Basically, they think that most learning, we have what's called long-term memory, and this is the things where we are able to store lots of information in. This is memory as we know it, essentially. Everything is stored here. We can forget things. But when we remember things, it's brought into something called short-term memory. And this is, if you like, the bench on the front of your class. It can only store a certain number of things, and that's where things go into straight away. Learning through all sorts of techniques which we get our students to use is the process of taking things from short-term memory into long-term memory. However, because this short-term memory has got limited capacity, this is where this cognitive load theory comes in. If our students, our ākonga in our classes, are given too much new information at once, all of it just gets forgotten. Once we get past this capacity, it just disappears. So the summary there is that it's a slow process learning. It's a slow process moving that things from short-term into long-term memory. So we have to reduce the cognitive load on our students as much as possible to give them the greatest chance of success. So that's removing distraction. It's giving clearly structured notes. Graphic organizers are a classic example of this. And worked examples have also been shown, a lot of research, to be really effective at this, because students can go back to them and see each step in context of the other steps without having to remember them all. So the big takeaway from that is we want to do all we can to reduce distraction and put clearly structured content in front of our students and help them with just reducing cognitive load. So anything we can do that is a distraction that we can get rid of is super helpful for them. At the end of this presentation too, I've put in a whole lot of links. If these things really interest you, you can go away and have a look at this, but I'm just going through these super quickly today because it's not the main point. But the second part here, and this is a little more directly relevant, is there's something called dual coding. And that is that cognitive scientists believe we've taken information in two different ways simultaneously. So the first of those is visual. So that's pictures we see. And I just want to emphasize that that is pictures. It's not reading. Reading is not a way that we've taken visual information. And this I've said here, it's parallel. So we see an entire scene at once. So you can look at your classroom and notice that there's a few students fidgeting, a few students with their eyes on you, a few students hard at work. We can take and get a really big picture here all at once. So we can get a lot of information here. The second way we take in information is what's called verbal information. And this is a bit confusing because this is words essentially. So whether we're reading or whether we're being spoken to, this is all sort of the same. And this gives us really detailed information. If you want to really know what one of your students is doing, you go and talk to them, or you go and read their work. But this is linear, so it's slower. We have to go through it one by one. We don't get to see the big picture all at once. Now, the interesting thing about this is scientists think that we process these simultaneously and we can make connections between the two. So there has been a lot of research. This is another model, a slightly fancier one by an educator called Oliver Cavaglioli. But the big takeaway from all of this is that if we present information simultaneously, so visually, so with a simple diagram or picture and with the words, students learn much better. There's lots of research that has shown this. There's all sorts of numbers which I don't have off the top of my head, but they show quite a significant increase in learning if you have visuals alongside the verbal or the words. And that is where I think PowerPoint is hugely beneficial. By dual coding information on them, we can help our students, and it provides much more equitable access because the newer students are, the more they're struggling with the topic, the bigger the effect of doing this has been shown to be. So you might have students that are super capable and only need to read a paragraph, and they'll be fine without that. But it's the other students in the class, when they have that dual coded information, so the simple visual alongside the words, that provides a huge increase in benefit for their learning. The last thing I've put here is this hybrid and flipped teaching. So if you haven't heard of this before, you probably have, but basically the extreme model of this, the flipped model, is that you pre-record all your teaching, your students watch it at home, and then they do their homework at school where you can work with them one-to-one. That's obviously quite extreme. Hybrid essentially means some sort of mix of the two. So students spend some time learning via video or reading in class rather than you just teaching at the front, and some time more traditionally. The big advantage of this is it does allow you to spend more one-to-one time working with your students, and they are able to get help when they need it doing exercises and access instruction when they don't necessarily need you to be there if it's pre-recorded. This has got some real advantages for offering differentiated instruction, and particularly at the moment, it is super helpful for absent students to catch up. We talk to teachers all over the place, and there's so many teachers we speak to just having to use Google Classroom and video and all sorts of things to help others catch up. So that is the super fast zoom through of just some education research that really supports some of the things that we can do with PowerPoint that I want to spend the rest of this presentation actually talking about. If there are any questions about that, we will. I just have to admit someone here, sorry. No, they're not there at the moment. Okay. They will come in a moment. If there's any questions about that, I'll probably take those at the end because I'd kind of like to get onto the core of this session, but you're welcome to ask questions, and there is a page of further reading links I've put there too. So this is what we actually want to do, how we can produce content that covers these things, so meets those aims for dual coding and trying to limit the cognitive load on our students. The first one here is just some real simple tips for designing slides for learning. And I've put these here under cut and just getting rid of everything that we don't need. So whether or not my boss will like it, I've removed all our company logos from everything but the first slide. I've gotten rid of all sorts of fancy borders and colourful things that might look wonderful, but this research suggests that they just increase the cognitive load on our students. So, and the next point I've got here is I've use stand first style summaries. And this is going back to that title slide we had, where if you have a really concise, accurate description. So the way I like to think of this is you want to kind of write the really clickbaity version that you'd see on the internet, and then just dial that back a little bit to be factually accurate and lose some of the extreme language. This is how we want to be writing our things. You can go online and find all sorts of journalistic articles about how to write these, but this is the sort of things that we should have in our slides, really dense, clear and attention-grabbing information. So the next thing here I've got is simplify, and you'll see all through this presentation I've got line drawings, and same thing there, photos, it's extra information which adds to cognitive load, which means that our students that are struggling the most are going to find that distraction. There's lots of research about that. That's that dual coding thing as well. The more little diagrams we have, the more little line drawings alongside the text is of huge benefit to our students. Just underneath that here, I think of borders and colors and fonts like hot chili sauce. You don't need much of it. If you add lots, unless you're one of the people that actually quite likes chili sauce like me, most people will just think it's complete overboard and lose all sense of the content there because they'll be overwhelmed by it. So fonts are an interesting one. I think further on here, I've got a little bit about that. And group content together. So we're going to talk a little bit about graphic organizers. The huge benefit of PowerPoint is that we can visually represent information. We don't just have to have text. So we have it nicely grouped in all sorts of different ways. And we want to use layout and visual cues to help show connection. So this is part way back towards this dual coding idea. The more we can visually represent things without having to have students process it through words, it's super helpful for them. Lastly, it should be tidy. Everything should be aligned. There's lots of research that shows left aligned text is much easier to read. So unless it's a heading or something, it should be left aligned. All of this, the easier things are to read, the easier they are for students to process. It reduces that cognitive load. So it lets them focus on what you're actually teaching them. I've put here columns and grids are your friend. Use a clear sans serif. So that means a font that doesn't have those little tick bits at the end. Those actually came about from when, I believe, in very ancient times, they used to chip words into stone and to get it cleanly in and out of stone, they had to add those little accents. I was looking at some research by Adobe the other day. They found, really interestingly, fonts, different age groups read and take on board information most effectively with different fonts. The font that they found was most effective on average for younger, i.e. our students' age, was a font called Poppins. It's a Google font that you can download for free. But anything there, basically any of those sans serif fonts, the fonts without little tick bits, was much more effective for young students reading and gaining information. So this whole presentation is in Poppins, but anything that's sans serif is fine. And different students they actually found did better with different fonts, but that Poppins one was one that worked best on average for a large number of young students. So that's some just general design tips that we're going to show you how to do, some of the techniques shortly in that how section up the top there. So here I've got graphics organizers, and these are just loads of ways of showing relationship and showing process on the screen. You'll notice here I've actually just hand drawn this and put this in with an app called Office Lens. I'll talk about that later. That can be super effective if you find preparing slides really slow, or you can even do this straight off your whiteboard. And it actually gathers attention in some ways that typed text doesn't on a PowerPoint. So that can work really well for students too. It also can work well if you're trying to put things together to help students catch up that haven't been there. So graphic organizers can be loosely related into kind of ones that show relationships and attributes and data, so mind maps and Venn diagrams and comparing and contrasting. Or we can put them into kind of flow or process or sequence ones, so timelines and flowcharts. So those are a fantastic way of visually representing information. And we can do this dual coding thing here. We can have little pictures alongside the word, and that helps our students further there. So kind of an extension of this is one of the key things of this presentation, which is a non-linear presentation. So a lot of the stuff we teach isn't linear. A lot of ideas and processes are not entirely linear, especially concepts. I teach a lot of chemistry. There's things that come in from all over the place and join together to make a definition. Secondly, this cognitive load theory idea, this idea that we can only hold so much in our short-term memory, means that as we go through a lesson, if we've introduced a key point first, our students are really at risk of forgetting that, losing that. So that can disappear. And I'll just flick forward there. So if we make a non-linear presentation that keeps coming back to a key point, a central point, some key definitions, that gets repeated, which we already know is great for learning. And it also just means that the cognitive load has been managed so that the new information they're given has been given with the core context every time. And the way we do this, which I'll go through shortly, is by including direct links to different slides in our PowerPoint. So in slides, we can have direct links to other slides, and they don't have to be in order. And that lets us better manage these ideas. So I'll give you a demonstration of that in another show super quickly shortly. But the result of this is we get simpler and more effective slideshows that we can teach with, and students can go and use in their own time for revision. So I'm just going to exit out of this PowerPoint and hop into another one here, because I wanted to show this with a more classic classroom distinction. So this is a slideshow I half put together, and we together later will add to this on the digestive system. So once I've gone to the first slide here, there's a whole lot of links. So I can click on more information about the mouth, or the esophagus, or the stomach, or the small intestine, and also some of these key ideas here. So I've put a key description of the digestive system here. That it's taking, and we've got this dual coding going here, it's taking food intake containing essential nutrients, and it's been broken down through these processes and then absorbed into the blood. And any of these blue links, or any of these here, I can click on and it will take me straight to a slide about them. So when I click on the small intestine, it will take me here. And I've got some of these blue function buttons down here. This home one here will take me straight back to this overview slide. So when you're using this for teaching, you can hop back each time, go through this key concept each time and then see all the parts. This is kind of our overview, or our zoomed out view of a concept map is my interpretation of this. However, I can also in here include links to another slide. So if students need to remind themselves what physical digestion processes are, they can click on that and it will take them straight there. We're going to add a little bit to this slide later. These buttons down here, there is a last slide button. It works really well on PowerPoint, on the full version of PowerPoint. If you are using the web version of PowerPoint, you can't actually put these links in, but you can't click on this last slide button. So if students are going to be doing that, I just wouldn't have that one. Just make sure that there's enough links that they can navigate around. But this lets students move around throughout a slideshow, or you as a teacher actually explain and move back and forth easily without having to flick through 30 slides forward and back, which is always easier. So that is just my example of a non-linear slideshow. This can be used through all sorts of subject areas though. I've seen people do similar sorts of things with choose your own adventure narratives. You can do this with maps and locations or a timeline for history, all sorts of things there. So, or you can have maths and then link to different fully worked equations in different areas. So it doesn't have to be in science. Science is just my background, so it's what I did there. Lastly, you can record video. So you can record teacher explanations, and you could even you probably wouldn't get the video, but you'd get the audio. You could actually, if you're running PowerPoint in class, just set it going and record your explanations as you pop through the slides and upload those for students that were absent. The video is obviously not going to be top quality, but it's an awful lot better than just working off students' notes. You can record worked examples. So I've put here, especially if you have some sort of pen that you can write on, either a drawing tablet. I've got one of those here, if you can still see my camera, or there are actually numerous TELA devices now that if you can convince your school to get you, come with digital pens that you can write right on the screen with. Those are fantastic. So if I come over to,
this is the PowerPoint screen recording device.
PowerPoint here, and have this in the pen mode. I can, using this tablet here, just draw right on the screen. And I'd have to come down and delete that because I don't really want my big red scribble. But so if you have a drawing tablet or a device which has a pen, there's all sorts of things here you can do for worked examples, but you can do those just with slides and pre-typed equations. You can give students differentiated access much more easily. You can include a second slide with a big, long explanation, or have the long explanation for students that can't work with the brief explanation there. You can also actually screen capture directly from PowerPoint, including things outside of PowerPoint. That's the next video that I'll show you in a moment, just to create mini how-to instructional videos, or if you want to show a colleague at the other end of the country from a teacher Facebook page how to do something. Or students can actually explain their work in video form and submit it back to you. So students recording work or recording explanations is actually a really powerful means of assessment. And students that have a presentation like a speech or some sort of presentation in class can actually record those remotely as well. This is super helpful for students that are away, obviously, at the moment, but also some students are much more confident sitting in a room by themselves talking to a laptop. And this might be something you want to do as kind of a just a differentiation access thing for them. So I will just flip to the next slide, which hopefully you'll hear the sound for. Normally works, but and that's just a video I recorded super quickly of using one of the drawing tools. So
this is the PowerPoint screen recording device, and I'm using it to show how you can use inked shapes. So I can draw a quick little flow chart. I'm using a digitizer tablet for this, but this isn't actually too bad to draw with a mouse either. Now I'm going to get the lasso tool, select all of that and press into shape. Wait a second and it will turn it into a beautiful flow chart for me.
So you can see it can be super helpful there just to show someone how to do something, and it just demonstrates the technique really quickly. Right. If anyone has any questions, now is a great time, because this is my super fast run through, and now is the time to actually show you how to do some of these things, a little bit more of a detailed demonstration. And while you think about any questions, basically the plan for this part of the webinar is I will go through the 3 sections we've covered, kind of some general tips, designing those non-linear shows and recording video in different forms. I will hop back to that demonstration slideshow shortly and show you how to do some of these things. So that had big blank bits partly for a reason. And then I'd encourage you to, and I'll give you some time to open up PowerPoint and have a go at this yourself. It's the best way to remember. That way, at the end of this, I'll send out this video, so you'll have that reference. I can send out the slideshow, so you'll have that reference, and you will have actually done it once as well, which is a fantastic way to remember. So just if there's any questions before we move on with that.
No, we're good.
Brilliant. So now's also a good time to open up PowerPoint if you haven't, but that is fine. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to hop across, and we're going to talk briefly about something called a slide master. Just talk about tracing simple images, because there's some, I'm not an artist, but there's some good ways of getting nice, relatively straightforward images that are really effective for your students, that follow those dual coding principles. They remove the information that they don't need. So there's the core ideas to focus on there. We'll talk a little bit, show you a few things you can do if you do have some sort of drawing pen. I would encourage you to push your schools to try and get some sort of a laptop possibly, but even if that's not possible, these things can be had really cheap on TradeMe. I think I paid $20 or $30 for this, so it's not, if you're a little bit patient, especially if you live somewhere with a few people on TradeMe, especially if you're doing anything like maths or things like that, they can just be worth their weight in gold. And they're super useful for video recordings as well. And then a few things to show you just about grid lines. So I'll hop through this bit reasonably quickly, but then we'll hop to the non-linear and the video parts of this. Scars. So I'm going to get rid of this now. I'm going to move that over there so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing to see here is there's something called a slide master. So I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but this lets you change defaults for a whole presentation, and it also lets you add things like these blue buttons to every slide in one go. So if I come over to view in my top menus here, these are the normal views you've probably used to change them here. There's this normal and outline view and slide sorter, but there's also something called slide master. And when I open this, there's a long list of slides down the side that are all just layouts. So these are the default, pardon me, the default layouts you can apply to slides. But anything you change here will change on every layout, and anything you add to this will add to every slide, kind of as a background that can't be deleted. So the first thing I might want to do is I've come up to the master slide. So everything under here is sort of a variation on that, if you like. So if I want to add it to every single slide, I'm going to come to this. And I'm first of all going to select this here, and I'm just going to change the font to this Poppins. So now if I do that also with these, most of the fonts in most of my slides will default to Poppins now. There's a few different ways you can end up with a different font, but the majority of it now will already be in Poppins. And if I want to put in a button, and we'll go through this again shortly, but we come into insert shapes and we're going to put in a little home button. Now, if I hold down Shift while I'm resizing this, it makes it stay a square, which is helpful so I don't end up with a really weird shaped house. I'm just going to put down this. And here it brings up with action settings. So I put in an action button, and I am not going to link this to the first slide because the first slide in this presentation isn't actually my the slide that I wanted to link to. I'm going to come down and click on slide, and then I can click on the slide I want it to link to. So I actually wanted to link to the second slide because the first one was kind of a real introductory one. So I'm going to click OK and OK. And now every time now I've got this button down here, I'm actually going to put it at the top because I think I already had one down there. So I've put this blue button at the top, and I can click Close Master View here up the top, or I can also go to View and click back to normal. And you'll see now every single one of my slides has got that button up here, and I can't select it, I can't delete it, I can't do anything with it. I could probably draw over the top of it, but it's just sitting there. So that's if you want to put something in every slide, that's a really good way of doing it. And if you want to change some of the fonts by default, so now all these fonts here have been changed to Poppins. They were Calibri or the default, I think. It's possible that there's some text boxes, depending on how you put them in, that might not quite get covered by that, but it will change the majority of it. So that is a slide master. And that just is, as a reminder, is a view and slide master. And that lets you change a whole lot of things at once or put these buttons in every slide. And particularly for the non-linear presentations, that is really helpful. Finally, my tip here for drawings. So the next thing I've got a few thing here is images. Line drawings are super clear. They really help towards reducing cognitive load, and they make slides a bit more interesting because it actually takes you look more skilled if you've gone and got a drawing instead of just kind of copied the first photo off the internet. So one trick those of us who are less artistically able can do is if you get an image off the internet and you get a pen. A pen is easier to do this, but it is possible to do it with the mouse. And you can just trace around the outside of this. I'm just going to do this super quickly this time. Trace around the outside of my nice hammer. I'm going to give this a little bit here and just kind of a little bit there. Brilliant. And I'm going to get rid of that now. And now I'm just going to get rid of this. And I've got a slightly wonky, but I've got a little picture of a hammer. This is great for drawing around people, or if you only have a really detailed photo and you want part of that diagram for a science diagram or a map or things there. So that's just one little way of getting these nice line drawings, and nice line drawings all of a single color, because it just really helps keep it clear and plain and reduces that load and makes it easy for students to pay attention to. The other thing is, as I had a few slides earlier, hand drawing diagrams is great. And on your phone or iPad, there's an app called Office Lens. And in that you can take a photo of a diagram you've taken, and that will actually automatically adjust the perspective of it if it's on a piece of paper, make it nice and square. And then you can upload it automatically to OneDrive. So if you then come in here, and if you have OneDrive on your thing, you can come down and find your, I've got way too many things on this computer, OneDrive folder, and it will be, if you set it to an Office Lens folder, and this is the mind map I drew out and had earlier in the presentation, and it can just come straight in like that. I'm going to delete that because we don't want that there. So that's quite a useful app if you draw things a lot on the whiteboard and want to save them. You draw on paper and want to put those diagrams straight into here. Can be super helpful for that. So if you do have a pen, and I'd really encourage you if you want to do this a lot, there's a few neat things here. So I can firstly, I can write 3x plus y equals 19 is not a good number to pick, but never mind. I can write that out by hand and select that slightly more accurately with the lasso tool. And then if I press ink to math up here, it will do its thing for a little moment. Should do its thing. Oh. It's not going to work for me just because I did this. So early in the day, normally, this works beautifully. So I'm going to do this again. We're going to get the lasso. It's always good when the tech presenter has something break for them, doesn't it? You can write input in here. You don't normally have to do it this way. So you can put stuff in here and just insert it, and it will insert your equation here. Normally it works from there. Not sure why that's not working. I won't spend time on that now. You can also, as I showed in that video earlier, just draw some simple shapes. So if you want a nice flow chart, might have drawn these two roughly, but I think this is just having attention. It might be because I'm presenting on Teams, but you saw that video earlier. Normally, if you click ink shape there, it will just connect, turn that magically into a nice, neat flow chart. Sorry that's not working properly. I suspect it's something to do with me presenting it on Teams at the same time. Lastly, these lovely grid lines you see everywhere here, those we turn on under View and under Grid Lines here. So there's this little Grid Lines option. And those just help you line everything up. They're a much easier way of keeping things nicely in columns, I find, than actually putting tables in often. And lastly, if you click the little further options here, you want to make sure you've got snap objects to grid selected, because that will mean when you're moving objects around, it will just snap onto them there. I always have this display smart guides when shapes are aligned as well. And that when we bring these things in, it has these little red lines that I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but it shows that things are in line with each other. But that's the default, so you've probably seen that before. Okay, so that's the kind of just simple tips for getting nice, neat slides and some of those diagrams there. The next one here that I want to go into is these non-linear presentations. How to actually link these slides, one slide to the other, and get those linked to different places within the document. So these notes are here, but those are more for your reference afterwards. What I would say is if you wanted to make quite a complex one of these, I would suggest sort of drawing a diagram paper first. But basically the idea here is that something is linked to something else in the document. So if I have some text here, so this is in my stomach slide, and there's text here labeling on a diagram, labeling the esophagus. So I can select that and come insert and link. And this is where you can put a hyperlink in. You've probably done that before, but you can also link to a place in this document. And it comes down with the titles of all the slides, and I can just link this directly to the esophagus slide. And it now has this nice blue link, and when I'm in this view here, I'd have to click Control and click that, and it would take me straight there. Normally, when you're actually presenting, you just click on it directly. So most things can be linked using insert and link. This one here is already linked to the chemical digestion thing. So place in this document, find the slide you want to link it to and press OK. Now, as you add slides and move things around, this is reasonably good at keeping track of things. The only times I've got myself into trouble is when I have put a link to a slide and then I've duplicated that slide and then I've edited the wrong one. So it's linked to the one that I've edited rather than to the... So I've edited the original one that another link is linked to rather than edited the duplicate that I meant to change slightly. But it is reasonably good at just keeping track of where things are supposed to be linked. So you can do that with a picture, you can do that with text, insert and link in anywhere within the document. The other thing that's slightly different here are these action buttons. And these are under insert and shapes, and they're down the bottom here. So there's some default ones, kind of representative ones, arrows for the next or last slide, and front or end. The ones I personally think are most useful, I like to use this home button and use that as kind of goes to my main object there. So I'm going to hold down Shift, keep that nice and square, put that in. And by default, it will hyperlink to the first slide. As I showed before, this pops up this button once I put in an action button. So I can change it to hyperlink to, and I'm just going to come down to slide and choose the one I want, which is actually the second slide here. And now every time this button gets clicked on, it will go straight to that slide. And I use that home one for kind of my overview slide, my central slide that lets students see what's going on. That would probably take you to the title if you're writing a choose your own adventure story, or a world map if you're in a kind of geography topic. All sorts of things there. There is a button here, and this can be quite useful, but there's some warnings about it. It's called a return button, and it takes you to the last slide view as its default action here. That works really well, but if you're accessing it through the web, it just doesn't work. It just goes back one slide. So if you know that it's only going to be accessed through the full version of PowerPoint on a computer, or if you want to use that while you're presenting, that's fine. But if people are likely to use that slow on the web, I personally wouldn't put it in, but that's up to you. But it is quite a useful button just to go back one slide. It also doesn't keep a history, so it won't keep going back and back and back. So that's the two main ways of navigating through slides. You can select text or an image and click Insert and Link. I'm just feeling blind because my link is gone over here. Or you can do that with an image as well. Or you can actually put these action buttons in. A link is really easy to change. You just select it and insert another link over the top of it. These action buttons, you can right click and come up and press edit link. So they are possible to change. You can actually add mouse over actions as well, but that sounds maddening to me. So I just leave them on mouse click and that's nice and simple. So those are the two main ways of navigating. The only other thing that might be helpful is you can actually drag a slide from the side here right into the middle of this slide. And then when I present that, that puts a slide here and I can click on that and it will sort of zoom into it. It's a fancy transition thing. I personally don't like having other whole slides in the middle of my slides, but it might be quite useful depending on what you're doing. So that is a third way of making links there. So action buttons, which are under the insert shapes right down the bottom. Anything can be inserted as a link. So insert link and then place in this document. Or you can actually drag a slide off the side here if your particular show happens to work with that. And just a little bit of a brief warning there, that last slide back button doesn't work if you're viewing it online there. Brilliant. Hey, thank you, Kim. Hope that appointment goes well. Now, that just about takes us to the last main bit here. So I've kind of put a summary there on that PowerPoint just for you. We don't need to go through that at the moment, but video. So there's two main ways we can record video. And that is you can record just a video overlay and slide by slide. You can screen capture, or you can So that is the two main ways. And finally, you can, at the end, your video, you can just leave in the PowerPoint presentation. So you can send it out to students. Students can click through, watch the different videos. You can present it in class, have it play on the screen. You can also actually, if you record a presentation for the whole thing, export that as a video that you could upload to YouTube or post onto Google Classroom, all sorts of things. So we'll show you how to do that towards the end. That can be useful too if students want to give a presentation on PowerPoint. They can just record that and then export the whole thing. It takes a reasonable amount of time to export. It's not super fast, but so during one of the original lockdowns, my wife who lectures at university, had to record a lot of lectures that she did that way. So at the time, that feature didn't work on a Mac, but I believe it now does, which is very good. So she stole my computer quite a lot of time during that time. So the really neat thing about that is as you record those videos, it essentially attaches one to each slide. So if you want to change part of your video, you only have to re-record that slide, which is really helpful. So I am not entirely confident that running Teams and the audio from that at the same time won't do weird things to this, but we'll give it a go. So under slideshow, there is a couple of options here. We can record from the beginning or record from the current slide. So if you want to just record through your whole presentation, one slide at a time, click on to the next slide, you can do that. We won't do that right now because I don't want to record a whole presentation with it. It would waste everyone's time. So we're going to click from the current slide. And yes, I suspect this would be the case. It's having attention because I'm already using my web camera. But that will bring up a menu. I'm going to clear that recording now. That will bring up a big screen and it has pretty clear instructions. So you can start. It is able to put your presenter notes up the top for you. And then once you finish that, you'll end up with a little video recording floating on that slide that you can select and drag around if you'll make it bigger and smaller. And during that time as well, you are able to use a pen tool and a laser pointer tool and things like that. The other thing, so under record here, we can go from the beginning, from the current slideshow, is we can go screen recording, and you can just record audio if you don't want video. I would encourage you though, the lecturers at university found much better engagement when they did actually have their little thumbnail up in the corner. It seems a little bit meaningless, but I think there's a whole lot of personal and emotional reasons that just having that person there. The other thing about that is that, and if you're like me and like to gesture lots, there's a lot of research that suggests that actually helps students learning as well. You might have to intentionally keep your hands up high depending on how you're sitting. So if we click screen recording, it's going to come up with this option here, and I can select an area. So I could select just this screen here. I'm just going to drag that box across the screen. And this time I will turn audio off since I'm already using my audio device, but normally you'd leave that on and that will just record you talking. And you probably want record pointer on. So then if we hit record, it'll have its time. And it's now recording everything I'm doing. So if I want to get back that little white box, I just go right at the top. But it's recording this mouse moving around. Today it won't be, but normally it'll be recording me talking. I can come out of PowerPoint, it's still recording, so I can come into whatever else I'm running, show people how to do things. And then when I'm finished, I can hit stop. And that will automatically just put that in this big overlay over the top of my slide. And we're changing the start options here. So once you've got video in your slide, and we'll just use this video now because this is the same as if we had a little video in the top corner. If we right click that or come up the top here, we can change its start options. So if you just want it to come on the moment it goes in the slide, you'd want it automatically. If you want it only to start once it's clicked on, so if you want it as kind of an extra explanation for your students, you can change that. So that way it's providing differentiated things. If your students are working off notes in class, most of them probably just need the slide there with a worked example. Some of them might want to click on the video and get you talking through the worked example. So that's this little, once you have your video, you can drag it around and the overlay of someone talking looks really similar. Now, the only other, so that's under playback here. You can change when it starts. So I've now changed this to when to only start when it is clicked on. The last thing here is after you have recorded video, often it will essentially, so come in here to transitions. If you've recorded a video, it will automatically change it so that when that video is finished playing, it advances to the next slide. So if you have lots of slides with video and you want this to be like a recording, that's brilliant. If you just want an explanation that students can kind of click on, that's not what you want. So to get rid of that, you have to come, so on the top menu here, to transitions, and on advanced slide, you're going to take off this after the certain time, because it will automatically add after the certain time to all the videos. So that's quite helpful if you record videos, explanations, and you suddenly find your slides are automatically jumping on at the end of it there. That's a really sneaky thing. And if you don't know where to look, so it's under transitions. So that's the movements between the slides. You can turn that off there so it doesn't do it automatically after the length of the video, and instead is only on a mouse click. Question? Nope, that's right. If you want to be super sneaky with going back to your non-linear PowerPoints, you could actually take off advanced slide or mouse click. And I assume I haven't actually tried this, that then your students would have to click around the links. They wouldn't be able to just advance manually by clicking the mouse again. So that is video. It's under record. You can record from the beginning and record a whole presentation going through all your slides. You can just go from the current slide and you can just re-record just one slide if you've already done the whole lot. And you can just do one slide. If you just want an explanation for a worked example, you can just record one slide, take off that automatic transition, and just have a video that the students can click on in the one slide with pen overlay on the screen showing your worked example. It's hugely flexible, and there's a lot that you can do with that. I'm going to get rid of this now and come back to here. This is a summary of that. I don't think there's much there that I didn't cover. It's more for your notes. I've just put some general video hints here if you haven't done much of this before. The first thing I'd say is just it's your teaching that is really helpful for your students here. Don't stress about looking funny or kind of ums or ahs or things. It's really helpful for them to have this content. It doesn't need to be perfect. Don't spend 6 hours re-recording things. It's not a huge high expense video production. Speaker's notes can help depending on what it is. So in the recording view, it will actually even keep the speaker's notes up the top of your screen and show the slides beneath it so that your eyes are more closer to the camera. So it looks like you're looking into the camera, which is quite a neat trick. Have a bit of a practice using the laser and pen tools because those are really helpful for helping demonstrate things while you're going. What I would say is the most important thing in your video is actually getting reasonable audio. Laptops are getting much better at this now, which is great, but make sure you're in a quiet room. You probably noticed my video earlier was recorded at work, so there's a bit of music in the background and a little bit of quiet chatter. Some classrooms can be terrible for this, so try and find a quiet place. If for whatever reason you're going to do a whole heap of this, you can buy $20 or $30 lapel mics, which clip to your shirt and have a long cable, and they just plug into the microphone headphone port on your laptop. it's a waste of time if you're just doing a few short things. But if you're teaching online and doing loads of this, that might be quite helpful. And do try and speak reasonably loud and clear. And the last thing, but this is actually far less important, is lighting. People will listen really for a long time to a video which doesn't look very good, but they can hear clearly. But if it sounds terrible, they'll switch off really fast. So I'd say just some tips here. Avoid direct sunlight. You don't want kind of half your face being hidden sun and the other half not. Really avoid backlight. So you don't want to be sitting with a window behind you with the camera looking at you because you'll have this kind of black silhouetted face. It makes us less self-conscious sometimes, but it really doesn't help students see gesture and expression, which helps with that emotional connection and some of that alternate learning. And finally, more and soft light is good. The more soft light you can get, the better it is. This is my second to last slide. So just to keep in mind, as we think about this, I really like the concept of getting students to actually fill in the details on these nonlinear slides, record their own video explanations. So my thinking with that digestive system thing is I'd give different students or different groups in the class to collaborate together and actually fill in all the slides under each of those areas. I think would be really effective. So that would be a really good way of doing that. As you think about that, you just have to think a little bit about how much of an expert they are and how much of a novice learner they are. So there's heaps of evidence showing that having students create and construct these things is really beneficial. But if they put things in the wrong place, explain things incorrectly, they learn it the wrong way, and then they learn it permanently the wrong way, which is really difficult to undo. So just a thing to keep in mind there. This is where you and we all have huge expertise already, is differentiating and scaffolding and providing structure there. And that's what I quite like about this nonlinear thing too, because you can provide a lot of structure and leave students and groups to flesh out their definitions, add their drawings, add their hand-done class drawings, and that sort of thing there. So there's just a continuum there to keep in mind. This is the slide here, so I'll email this one out to you tomorrow, but that has a bunch of links if you're interested. The things I've found really interesting and engaging and thought-provoking. So, opportunity for any questions, and thank you very much. And also, if you could please, there's a link there to a survey, and I'll send that out as well. It would be super helpful if we could hear from you, because we want to make sure that we're targeting these in the right and actually making them helpful for you. So, any questions? If there's no questions, that is fine, but I'll just hang around for a moment if there are any questions. Otherwise, you can look forward to a video and the slides in a day or so from me.